So I hope everyone can hear me. So yes, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you to the IA to talk about the Manx Beauty project. Interesting listening to just some of the chat before we started and questions about the Fisheries Museum. This is not a Fisheries Museum project. Some of you will remember that I used to work for the Fisheries Museum many years ago, but this is a community project. And I'll start with just a bit of history of the boat. So it probably is sensible to go back a bit before the boat was built. For those of you who are local and know a bit of local history, the gentleman on the left-hand side of the screen is Provost Carstair, and he was a bit of a visionary in the fishing industry. Invested in a lot of boats, and in the late 1920s, he could see that the steam drifters' days were done and very expensive to run, and the fishermen were getting smaller and smaller shares of the money for the amount the boat was costing. So motor-powered vessels were beginning to come in, but they were very much based on the sailing fishing vessels, same shape. And he commissioned a couple in 1928, one called the Winaway and one called the Onaway. And they were quite successful. But then in 1930, the boat that you see on the right-hand side of the screen is called the Gleanaway. He commissioned Forbes Yard in Sandhaven to build it, and she was the first cruiser-sterned motor drifter. So the first boat that you would probably recognise almost like a modern shape, the rounded stern rather than the straight up and down that the sailing boats had. And that was in 1930. And she reduced the running costs of equivalent to a steam drifter by, certainly it was under a quarter at times. The Secretary of State for Scotland was at her launch, and she was hailed as a very successful boat and probably the mother of the modern Scottish fishing fleet. When he came to replace her in 1936, instead of going back to the same yard, he decided to open up a boat yard in Cellardyke and brought one of the Forbes family down. This boat was called the Royal Sovereign, and you can see her being built in the bulwark in Cellardyke here. Quite amazing when you think Cellardyke Harbour is such a small harbour. Here she is, launched in 1936. She's a 75-foot boat, so longer than the Reaper. And as I say, she was called the Royal Sovereign, and again, launched by the Secretary of State for Scotland, seen as the next step forward in the development of the modern fishing boat at that time. He built one more vessel called the Star of Hope for the Carstorphans locally, and then got an order for 3 vessels. The photographs that you see now are probably some of the best known photographs of Cellardyke, very iconic. 3 boats built in the bulwark there. The furthest away one on the left-hand side is a pilot cutter built for the Tees Pilot Cutter Company, but the nearest 2 are, the middle one is the Manx Beauty, and the nearest one is the Manx Fairy. The reason they came to Provost Carstair's yard to build these state-of-the-art ring netters was that Provost Carstair's was known to try and make things pay very well for the fishermen. And they were trying to revive the herring fishing industry, the indigenous herring fishing industry in the Isle of Man. Trying to encourage young men back to the fishing. They'd had a huge sailing fishing fleet, but when it came to steam power, there was very little investment. And by the 1930s, the West Coast ring netters from Scotland and the Irish ring netters were all making a fortune out of the Irish Sea, and the Isle of Man men were not going to the fishing any longer. So Provost Carstair's whole ethos about getting as good a share for the fishermen as possible was one of the reasons that persuaded the Isle of Man government to come to him to get these boats built. Here we see them almost complete. Manx Fairy on the left-hand side, Manx Beauty on the left-hand side, Manx Fairy on the right-hand side. As I say, state-of-the-art. Ring netting was a method that grown popular from the late 1920s and was probably in its heyday in the late 30s. It is, as it suggests, the two boats basically ring their net round the fish and then pull them in and scoop the fish out of the net, as opposed to the drift net where the herring swam in and were caught by their gills. Move on to the next slide. Here's the Manx Beauty on her launch. We were launched on the 11th of June 1937. Very high tide. As you can imagine, launched sideways on. The Manx Fairy was much closer to the slipway at the end, probably launched in about 4.5 feet of water on that high tide. The amazing thing about them after they were launched was they set sail for the Isle of Man within a day. They would have gone through the Forth Clyde Canal and they appeared for their official naming ceremony in the Isle of Man on the 15th of June, on the Tuesday, after they were launched on the Friday. But just incredible that they were ready, sea trials done. And here we have the Manx Beauty and the Manx Fairy on the left-hand side. And Forbes Yard in Sandhaven built sister ships, the Manx Lad and the Manx Lass. And you might imagine that that's the end of the East Neuk connection with these boats. Once they were launched, they were away, but not so. The gentleman on the left-hand side here with his wife is a Loch Horsburgh from Pittenweem. His wife was a Peel lass called Esme Quayle, and Loch had gone to the fishing for several years to the Isle of Man with Pittenweem fishermen, and had met Esme and married her in 1934. They came back to the East Neuk, lived in the East Neuk, and then he was offered to be skipper of the Manx Beauty. When she was launched, he was only 24 years old at the time. So he was the first skipper of the Manx Beauty. And on the right-hand side, the gentleman in the sailor's uniform is John Dees. This was John in World War I. John, his father was father of a very well-known Cellardyke fisherman, Cool Dees, and John Dees and May Bridie as well. John was going to be crew of the Manx Fairy, and there was another local man, Charles Hughes, became skipper of the Manx Fairy. So these guys and a couple of others took the boats through the Forth Clyde Canal and through to Peel. Charles Hughes left fairly quickly, and John became skipper of the Manx Fairy. And these guys were very successful, although they hated the ring net. They were drift net men through and through, but they were very successful, and the crews liked working with them. They were very popular. And of course, it was only a couple of years later that World War II broke out. And the boats were requisitioned in 1941. This is not the Manx Beauty or Manx Fairy. This is a Pittenweem boat called the Courageous, which was built by Walter Rieke in St. Monans, or it might have been his Anster yard. But the Manx Beauty and the Manx Fairy, Manx Lad and Manx Lass all were too small to go on putting out submarine nets or on convoy support. So what they did was they were harbour inspection vessels. And like the Courageous here, they had a machine gun fitted on the foredeck. You can see that there. And the photograph, the colour photograph below, shows the inside of the Manx Beauty today with some steel supports to support the weight of the machine gun. So on the outbreak of World War II, Loch Horsburgh signed up straight away. In fact, he went straight to the office in Peel to sign up and discovered it was a Sunday and was sent home again because the office wasn't open on the Sunday, and returned, and he was the first person in the queue on the Monday, the first person to sign up, and his crew asked him why. He said he couldn't face his men if he hadn't signed up. And he did a complete service during World War II in the Royal Navy. John Diesel was a bit older. When the Manx Fairy was conscripted, when it was requisitioned in World War II in 1941, he returned to Anster without a job and became a night watchman in Walter Reeky's yard in Anster. That's the yard that was next to the lifeboat shed. The Manx government, however, the company, the Isle of Man Fisheries Company, still wanted to be fishing. The prices were very good. It was feeding the nation. So they commissioned a couple, 4 more boats from a yard in Ireland, in Arklow. The Manx Clover, the Manx Bell, Lily and Fuchsia. And John was such a good skipper for them that they asked him back to go and pick up some of the boats from Ireland, which he did, and got done for smuggling, because the owners of the company had decided to bring some fine china back from Ireland and hadn't bothered telling John that they were aboard the boat. And when he arrived back in the UK with the boat, the customs men discovered all this fine china, boxes of fine china aboard the boat, and he was actually fined for smuggling, although it wasn't his fault. So after the war, the Manx Fairy, Manx Beauty and Manx Lass returned to the company, and all the guys worked them, not necessarily with one specific boat, because John Dee skippered the Manx Beauty at times, the Manx Bell, Manx Rose and the Manx Clover. And the boats were stayed in company ownership till the 1950s, when the Manx Beauty was then sold on to Wales, Conway trawlers. She then sold on to Ireland, and in 1959 she was sold to Skibbereen. And the next bit of story we have about her was in 1964, when an Alistair MacLean bought her from Ireland and took her to Tobermory. And this is him, this is about 1965. Alistair had her in Tobermory. We've got some great stories from Alistair, who's still living. This is him in the wheelhouse here. He took her to the Creels. And Alistair said, as have other people that worked there, that the Manx Beauty was the best seaboat they have ever been on. And part of that is due to this design of the stern that Willie Carstairs had developed with the likes of the Gleanaway and the Royal Southern, this cruiser stern, rounded stern, not typical of a ringnetter, which used a much sharper, what they call canoe sterns, but she was a very good seaboat, and probably more like some of the boats that were developed in the 1950s. Alistair then took her to the prawns as well, fished trawling at the prawns, and in 1972 had a brand new boat called the Aquila built at Noble's Yard in Girvan. The Manx Beauty then was sold to Cornwall. She spent a year in Cornwall, and then she was sold to the Maddocks family of Birkenhead, who brought her up to Birkenhead, and she spent the rest of her working life there. And this is what she looked like at the end of her working life. She had had a new wheelhouse fitted to her. She'd been tied up for a few years, and the owner had been working a steel boat and was just selling fish from her deck. So why do we have her? Why was she of interest? She came up for sale, and there was a group of a community group came together and said, "Oh, is this boat worth saving? One of the last ones built in Cellardyke, a real icon of Cellardyke, one of the few 1930s ringers that's still surviving." So we went down to see her and had a look, and she was in pretty poor condition. We came back pretty despondent, but had lots of thoughts about it, lots of chats about it, and eventually the group said, she may be in really bad condition, but she's certainly worth saving. So this was about a year ago. We went down again, inspected her again, did a little bit of a survey, and oh, here's Arthur Maddock. He's the last skipper, and you can see what she looked like inside as well. Very, very much as she would have looked in the 1930s. So we agreed with Arthur's son, who's also Arthur, I think 5th generation called Arthur Maddock, that it really wasn't feasible to sail her back. Above the water, she was in such poor condition. So we agreed in November last year that he would sail her down the river to Bromborough, and she would get lifted out there. And here she is on her final journey at sea, leaving the docks in Birkenhead and getting lifted out at Carmet Marine in Bromborough. Now, Carmet Marine is on the same site of McTay Marine, who used to own Miller's Yard in St Monans, who bought over Miller's in the 70s and operated it until 1992. So it's quite fitting that she should be lifted out of the water there. We then had to go down and prepare her for road transport. So we had to remove the masts, we had to get her down to a certain height so that horrible steel wheelhouse came off her. You can see what sort of condition she's in there. She was also hanging with mussels. She hadn't been out of the water. There's probably about 2 tons of mussels on her. Stripped her right down, and it took quite a bit of operation and several trips down for our transporter to actually get her ready to come up. So this was her arriving in February this year, and that's at Pitcairn Garage. I'm very grateful to Kenny Ward for letting us store her there currently. So she arrived there, was lifted off and set in position. And of course, what happens then? COVID and lockdown. So we've really been in a bit of limbo over the time. And it wasn't until lockdown was lifted slightly that we could start going back to the boat. Now, the plan at this stage was to draw plans of her, because she's never had any plans. Boats of that age were made from half models. So we are volunteers with Nick Chalmers, who's watching this evening. Hi, Nick. Drew up, took plans of her, lines of her, and this is the start of actually being able to draw 3D models of her as she would have been built. We then are having to strip her out totally on the inside so we can cost the project effectively. It's all very well looking at her on the outside, but the wood can be rotten from the inside out. So the engine's coming out, the cabin's coming out. We're saving as much of that cabin as possible, the fascia, because it's such a lovely 1930s feel about it. We've still got the ballast to come out. The engine is just about ready to come out. The fuel tanks are about ready to come out. And that's basically where we're stuck at the moment. Over that period, over the period that we got her in November, we realised that a trust had to be the way forward with her. And so, in conjunction with looking at how the Cellardyke Sea Queen would go forward and other Cellardyke projects, it was agreed, and with the trustees of Cellardyke Trust, that this would be a good project under that umbrella. The Cellardyke Trust was formed. We got our accreditation from Oscar in February this year as well. I think 21st of February. And of course, they would go back to the whole lockdown problem. We applied for a bank account the week after, and we still do not have full access to a bank account yet. It was just this week we were beginning to get our online signatures and all that sort of thing. The account was opened about 3 weeks ago. So it's been very difficult to do any fundraising because we had no place to put any money, and not really to do a very big media adverts of the project, because again we had no place to put the money. We're hoping that we're going to be able to access lottery funds, but that's again in doubt with the whole lottery funds being diverted to keep places open. But we've got lots of different schemes going on as well. So not just schemes, projects that we went to St Andrews University and applied to a community fund from them, which we were awarded. Now, for me, there's no point in having an old boat, unless it's relevant nowadays. unless you can interest young people, unless we can have the next generation interested in it. So part of that project is reaching out to school pupils and looking at a wooden boat, and the Manx Beauty in particular, being your ultimate recyclable object. So our project with the Wade is working with their eco committee. Now again, it's on hold at the moment until perhaps the spring, when they can get their committees up and running again, just once the schools settle down to their new ways of working. But the Wade Eco Committee, hopefully we can work with them to then create workshops for the primary school eco committees. And I don't just mean Anster, I mean East Neuk and beyond. Looking at replanting, so that we will be providing seeds, seedlings, working with the primary schools, so that every piece of wood that we replace on the Manx Beauty, the bits of oak and things like that, we are replacing with new trees. Also talking about climate change, but this will be driven through the Wade Eco Committee. Then on the other side, the stuff that comes off the boat that is still reusable, not used for the boat, but even down to tiny little pieces. We're working with the East Neuk men's shed, and we will be working with other men's sheds as well to try and make objects out of that. I have a clock that was made of a piece of oak from my boat, the Fruitful. It can go right down to key rings, coasters, lots of different things, and boxes made to look beautiful on the outside, but can show the wood that was that it looked like on the inside. To do things like, well, David Todd is making a scale model of the boat that we can use in education stuff as well. That's one of our projects, and that'll be an ongoing. So hopefully that youngsters will be able to follow where the planting of these trees happens. We'll be looking at different bits of land, asking for people to come forward with bits of land as well, but we'll mark all where these are, and hopefully the youngsters in 30, 40 years time will be able to go, we planted that tree, and you know, that helped save this boat, the Manx Beauty, and it also, you know, helped in climate change. Alongside this, there's a music project. This goes back long before we even got the boat. I've been working with a group of musicians, which include a friend called Margaret Robertson, who is the fiddle major for the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. Rachel Gray, who is a piper that's appeared in my previous shows. David Burns, a young graduate musician from Pitt and Weem, that's just graduated from Edinburgh. And a designer and director, Robin Peoples, who I worked with the Singing Kettle, but now designs for the National Theatre and lectures in theatre design in the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. And our project is working in conjunction with the Conservatoire. Again, had to go on hold for a bit while they sort of discover how they're going to work this year, so we'll be starting our conversations again. But we're going to tell the building of the boat and writing new pieces of music to tell that story. We're very hopeful that in probably 2024 or 25, we are going to have a show ready with young musicians from the Isle of Man, young musicians from the East Neuk, young musicians from the Fraserburgh area where the sister ships were built, and we will be creating this new show telling the story of the build of the boat. And we will build the boat on stage in a theatrical device. The show will also be designed so it can be site specific, so we could take it to a harbour site. And if everything lines up, if all the stars come together and line up correctly with our restoration project, at the end of the show, the ultimate reveal for us will be sailing the actual boat in the harbour. So we're interesting young musicians in music, but bringing in that story as well. So they will be able to they might not be boat geeks, they might not be interested in the story in an actual boat, but we are bringing in people using their skills and their interests into this whole story of the Manx Beauty and building in Cellardyke. The other thing about old boats is how do you keep them paid for every year? So we formed another trust called the Fruitful Fund, named after my boat, although as a trustee, I'll tell you straight off, I can't benefit from this at all, and I had no intention trying to do that. But the idea of the Fruitful Fund is to raise money that can be grant given to historic Scottish fishing vessels for the maintenance. Now you can get grants for restoration, but it's very hard to get maintenance money. We're running a small scheme called 10p for tradition, and we're asking that people give the equivalent of £5.20 a year on a standing order or annual internet payment into the fund. And by building up lots of these, you can build up a fund that then gives out the money annually to the historic fishing boats for the maintenance, or for appearing at community events like the Portsoy Old Boat Festival. By breaking down the thing into £5.20, it becomes a very affordable payment. And unlike big funds, should one funder drop out, you're not scrabbling around to try and find £20,000, £30,000. £5.20 off the loss of your major fund is an easier one to replace. So hopefully we'll be able to build this up over several years and be able to support vessels, not just the Manx Beauty, like perhaps the museum's White Wing, the Reaper, and other boats other historic boats throughout Scotland. So hopefully, at the end of this, we will have a boat that looks as beautiful as the model that you can see that's housed in the Fisheries Museum. We have lots of other plans for her when she's complete as well. We've been discussing with people about doing cookery demonstrations aboard her if we went to festivals. So, in conjunction with the new East Neuk Salt Company, we've been discussing about trips out to with underwater cameras, so we could be showing people what it's like out just off the East Neuk. The plan is to bring her up to MCA standards, so she can actually take trips with people, and we'll have steel railings and wire around the side to make her all safe. She's licensed to take people out. We've been talking about her being an oral history boat. We're already starting with the Cellardyke Trust doing some oral history recording, so we can visit other ports and invite people to come and tell their stories. We've also been speaking to the Wade about providing practical training for youngsters as well, so that youngsters from the Wade are already doing sea survival courses. We then could be taking them out and giving them practical side toward this as well. So lots of plans in the future. Some will make it, some will fall through the net, but what we're really, we're right at the beginning of the project. COVID has slowed things down a bit. It's put the dampers on a lot of it, but we're now just at that point where we can be starting to raise money, starting to get the enthusiasm. So we'll be looking for more volunteers in lots of different aspects, not just for practical things. There are exhibitions that we've got planned as well around them. There's a photographer that has been doing fantastic macro photographs of the boat as she is. So there's an exhibition being prepared on that. We have another artist who's been doing etching work around the boat. So there's lots of scope for different things that could be happening. All exciting. It doesn't need to just be about restoring an old boat. It has to make this vessel relevant for this generation, for the next generation, so that when our great group of volunteers that we've got at the moment are long gone or past it, there's another generation that's coming on to actually have a feeling about this. Obviously, we'll use her for things like the Sea Queen and other festivals, Simone and Sea Queen, all these sort of things as well. But that's really probably the very basic story of the Manx Beauty as she's at the moment. So I'll come off the share screen and then give a chance for questions and answers. So here we go.
Thanks very much, Richard. That's brilliant. Really, really interesting. So much going on. So have we got any questions? There's nothing showing on the chat at the moment. If anybody wants to wave to get my attention. Anybody's got a question? Elizabeth, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi there. You say it's early days for fundraising and so on. Do you have a big bold figure of what you think the cost might be?
Our initial figure we had for the restoration work alone, because we're not including the music project into this. The music project is a separate project which hopefully will be going through the likes of Scottish Arts Council, Creative Scotland as they are now, separate group. The initial figure we were looking at was round about £250,000, and that's, we're also thinking that we will be doing certain fundraising initiatives like sponsor a plank or a rib, or you know, when it came to bringing the boat to Pitcairn, we realised we needed lots of wooden blocks to put her on. And we didn't have them, and they were going to cost about £15 a head. So I did a quick online Facebook thing saying, can you help us out? We'll stick your names on the blocks, £15 a head, £10 to £15 a head. Overnight I raised £650. So that showed us that if people are going to be recognised for their support, and we could put people's names onto a plank on the inside of a boat, you know, so, and take a photograph, because it might then be hidden, and have a hall of fame someplace online on perhaps the Cellardyke Trust's website, cellardyketrust.org. There are lots of different ways of raising money, not just going to the big Heritage Lottery Fund, which we hope we can access. But until we have her stripped out, we can't accurately cost her. You know, we need to get the concrete ballast out of her to see what it's like underneath there. We know, we are perfectly aware from the waterline upwards, she's rubbish. And we knew that from the start. You know, we came in with our eyes open on that one. But, as we say, a wooden fishing boat is your ultimate recyclable object. Every aspect of it can be replaced. And if we're going to be planting to replace the new wood we're using as well, you know, it's fantastic.
Thank you, Richard. I love the breadth of your vision. It's really exciting.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Definitely. Is there someone else with a question? Dougie, if you unmute yourself.
Hi, Dougie.
Hi, Richard. Thank you very much for the talk. I really enjoyed that. Where are you getting the skills from to actually refurbish this boat? Okay.
At the moment, within our group of volunteers, we have one time-served boat builder, now retired. Some of the other volunteers have long been involved in the Scottish Fisheries Museum Boats Club and have been involved in other restorations as well. Our hope with the restoration and the grant is that we can employ a boat builder for up to 3 years.
Right.
So that we are working with youngsters to give them practical experiences. Now, I know we're not going to train new boat builders, but the Wade, our local high school, has very few outlets for practical workers at the moment. So having spoken to them, you know, if we can create opportunities that the youngsters can get, you know, joinery skills or practical things that they can, that actually can be shown by a boat builder, again, hopefully that will also enthuse them into being the next generation that want to help save this boat and things like that in the future, you know, be really interested in it. We've also spoken to some mental health charities and the men's sheds, so that we can be using some of these people, that we can actually give them further experience or new skills. And along with Fife social work criminal justice department. There are people with skills that need to be brought back into society as well. So yes, we are at the moment pinning our hopes that we can have a trained boat builder that can be there sharing skills over 3 years. I mean, if it went into a yard, you could probably have the work done in 12 months,
oh, sure,
18 months.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's not the point of it. The point of this is a community build, a community restoration. So that's the vision.
Right. So your central core is going to be a boat builder who will then share out little jobs to guys that have got a bit of woodworking skill, but not necessarily boat builders. Yes,
that's right. But within our group of volunteers, in fact, sorry, I'm lying, there's two time-served boat builders within a group of volunteers, and there are others that have already been involved in the restoration of the White Wing in the museum, the work on the Reaper, my boat, the Fruitful, as well. So, you know, they're not unskilled, although they're not time-served as well already. So there is a good group of volunteers with a good core skill as it is.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Nicky.
Who else has got a question for Richard? Kate, can we actually hear you now? Oh, have you put something in chat? Let me just have a look. So Kate would like to ask Richard about the research into the history. Was that all there already in the Scottish Fisheries Museum, or did he have to dig out all the photos, etc.? And if so, where from?
Well, they've come from all over the place. As part of to enable us to get a grant, we have to follow National Historic Ships guidelines on restoring a vessel. And part of that is you have to have a plan for the vessel, obviously. You have to have your condition reports at different stages, and you have to have the history. So a lot of the photographs, we've gone to previous owners to, you know, research the previous owners. We now have a document that is 110 A4 pages long on the history. We've got some other volunteers. In fact, Nick's wife Janine is in contact now with the last owners and finding the last 50 years of history for us. So, you know, that's how we use other volunteers as well. You know, if that's what their interest is, they'll go out and do some research for us. So some of it has been online, but a lot of the Cellardyke photos are very readily available here. You know, as soon as people heard that we were bringing her back, she is iconic to Cellardyke. You know, a lot of people know these photographs, had copies locally, and have come forward with them. But, you know, I mean, Alistair McLean from Tobermory was just fantastic. I didn't know of his existence. We have the Facebook page. He contacted us that way. The Facebook page is called Bring Back the Beauty. And he contacted us that way. And, you know, I've had long conversations, and we have a great history of her through his ownership. And there are gaps. We need... I've not got anything about the Welsh ownership, gaps in the Irish ownership, and so. But you know, we're getting there. It's an amazing document. I mean, Nick's work on the measurements, and we're hoping to have proper 3D images of our inside and out. We've been doing that, what's called photogrammetry, with another volunteer photographer. So you know, it's all coming together. If you've been people that have been driving past and thinking, you know, that old boat's just sitting there with nothing happening. There's actually, in lockdown, there's been a lot happening, you know, from what we could do sitting at home or with the other skills, not necessarily physically working on the boat.
Super, thanks.
Is there anyone else?
Well,
questions?
Kate's added a further question. Who had that amazing photo of the 3 boats? Who took it?
I think now there was several local photographers at that time. George Cowie took some. Now George Cowie's main collection is housed by St Andrews University, and his local ones were given to a local photographer called Bill Flett, and now Bobby Cathcart has them. I'm not sure which, because some of the local ones I've not got any names on the back of them. The other local photographer of the time was Harry Berstashire, who had a studio up, it was up the back of one of the wines on Shore Street in Anster there. So between these two photographers in the 30s, these just a fantastic, really high quality images. I have as many of these images on, we launched the cellardyketrust.org website maybe just a month ago. So if you look cellardyketrust.org, it's got the Sea Queen, it's got the Manx Beauty. There's 11 pages about the Manx Beauty in there, including condition and different aspects of the history, Lochhorsborough's history, John Deasy's history. And there's other fantastic stories. May Brady, she is now, used to go out and visit her dad with her mum to the Isle of Man, and her mother went gutting while they were there. May went to school there and then made a lot of friends in the Isle of Man. Of course, during World War II, there was a lot of interns there. Jimmy Brattasani's uncle was interned in the Isle of Man and died out there. And so Jimmy used to give me a £5 every year to place flowers on his uncle's grave. So May kept a lot of friends in the Isle of Man and would have been there this year had it not been for lockdown. 90-year-old that she is. John Dees kept us, worked there till 1946 and then came home with muscular dystrophy and died a couple of years later. But so, you know, the connections continued. It wasn't just on the launch, yes. Any other questions? Elizabeth.
Elizabeth's got her hand up again.
Can you tell us a little more about your plans to do with all the musical ideas you have?
Yes, well, as I say, my designer is a very clever designer. So we're going, as I say, we're going to build the boat on stage. The story, I hope, will come through the building of the boat and going to Peel. For those of you who know me, I already have 2 shows under my belt that are stories. The Bernicia Suite, which I told the history of the first owner of this house that I'm sitting in at the moment, Daniel, and his loss in 1900. Then the next story I did in conjunction with Kevin Dunyan, which was the Elizabeth Johnson story. Both of them disasters, both of them losses of life. And I thought, I can't be known as the man that writes these disaster stories. So I'd already been starting writing the story of the Manx Beauty and had some pieces of music ready. But what we really want to do is, our plan is to go to work here, to go out to the Isle of Man and to go to the Fraserburgh area, which we have connections in as well. We also have a poet called Martin Malone working with us. And we'll do workshops in the schools in each of these areas and then talk to them about creating music round local history. And then the musicians we'll be working with will not be primary school kids for the show. We might do workshops in the primary schools, but the aim is that the quality musician that will be going into the Royal Conservatoire. So, you know, it's that stage in people's career. And in effect, what we'll be doing is running a summer school. Perhaps if it's Celtic Connections we're aiming for, which is a January show, the summer school, I'm saying summer school, but it will be in October. The October holidays, we will be working with the youngsters, developing the show, training them up, and then the set will be getting built. The rehearsals will go on online as well, and then proper rehearsals and performances at Celtic Connections, and then touring after that. We've got a schedule for this. As I say, the plan was going to be 2024. Again, the pandemic may mean it has to be 2025 because the Conservatoire, you know, like all further education institutions, are now just learning how to do new things online as well. That's okay. There is no rush, you know. I want to get it right.
Thank you. It sounds exciting.
Yes, yeah.
Anyone else got a question for Richard? Oh, yes, David Andrews. If you unmute yourself.
Wondering, once the restoration is all done, where's the beauty going to be birthed?
Okay, we hope that we've had very, very brief conversations with Fife Council, but we hope that we can birth it over the summer in Cellardyke Harbour. We have this sort of vision of Cellardyke Harbour being a historic boat harbour. I mean, there's very little else can be done with it. The potential, you know, and I'm not saying this is definite, but there is potential that some of the booms, the wooden planks that used to go across the mouth of the harbour to cut the swell down, could be placed in at times to protect old vessels in there. So you could have the Manx Beauty in there over the summer, you could have the Fruitful, you could have other smaller old boats in there and make a real feature of Cellardyke Harbour. It would be fantastic. It would be a lovely vision, because Cellardyke, I hate to say this, Crail, but Crail has, although it's a beautiful harbour, has lots of modern boats and lots of modern fixtures, fittings around the harbour. Cellardyke is 100% unspoiled as a harbour, and just to have the old vessels in there would just be an amazing tourist attraction in its own right. So that's the vision. But again, we're 4 or 5 years down the line. We'll need to speak to Fife Council about this properly. Obviously, over the winter, couldn't be kept there. We'd need to potentially bring them back into either Anster or St Monians, wherever was suitable, and Fife Council were amenable to at the time. And obviously use them for other festivals as well.
Thank you. I walked past the harbour today and there was a boat actually moored there for once. And I just realised how empty it usually looks, how good it was to have something there.
Yes. Again, I would have had my own boat, the Fruitful, in there a few times this year, but it's just with lockdown at the start of the year and other issues, it's not been possible. But yeah, it does. I mean, it's just lovely when you see the old boats there.
Thank you, David. I think Nick had got a question.
Can you hear me? Yeah, not so much a question actually, but just thanks, Richard. A great talk, and thanks for giving us the bigger picture. I've spent a lot of hours in recent weeks sort of getting down and dirty in the bilges there, so it's great to be reminded of the famous, remarkable past history of the boat and also of the future plans. It's going to get me back down into those bilges with a renewed sense of purpose.
Well, I mean, we'll have to say thank you to you, Nick, and to Mike and to Bob and Dave. You know, it's not a very nice job being down in these bilges of a boat that hadn't been out of the water for 15 years at least. And you know, it's fantastic that folk like you are spending the time and share the vision as well. You know, absolutely share the vision. You, having been on it, Nick, you will absolutely understand what that felt like being in that in the cabin there. I mean, it was so 1930s nostalgia. I couldn't believe the first time I went on it. You know, Cool's dad sat there. Cool's dad ate a meal there, and you know, we've managed to bring in the likes of Ellie, our last year's sea queen. You know, who's the granddaughter, the great granddaughter of that man. And sit there, and you know, you're thinking there are generations of people that are just going, hey, that was my great granddad's. Just amazing. And so, yeah, thanks, Nick. I think something I also didn't say is, you know, I started with a history. The boat is very important in the whole design of Scottish fishing vessels as well. It's not just locally important. It's not just Isle of Man important. It was one of the last fishing boats out of Birkenhead. It's, you know, there's lots, and the fact it served in World War II. There are lots of reasons that this boat is a significant one to save as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Figgy again.
I was quite intrigued to see these boats up in the harbour. I've only ever been in Cellardyke a couple of times when I've been over in Anster. Never really associated it with shipbuilding or boat building. But to see them sitting there being built and so far away from the water, the height they were away, I was quite intrigued as to how they were launched and how they got to their actual launching place.
Yeah. Well, the bulwark in Cellardyke is right next to the harbour. It's literally, I mean, how they put the planks on these boats without falling into the harbour is
Yeah.
unbelievable. It really is. And they were launched sideways. So one of the photographs I have, which I didn't have in the presentation, all three boats are in a line from the far side of the harbour. They had them tipped back just slightly just before they were launched. And sideways in, because the resistance into the water is not like a long ways in, you know, they don't travel any distance at all. But Cellardyke is a boat building town. I mean, I don't know how much you know about Cellardyke. You know, I'm sorry, I'm a geek about it. But Cellardyke owned 170 first-class sailing fishing vessels in the 1870s.
Jeez.
It had a boat builder. It was the second most important fishing area in Scotland at that time. It had a boat builder called John Miller working from just past the harbour, and he built over 100 boats in his boatyard. There was an Alexander Cunningham and boats there as well. Then when Cellardyke Harbour itself was too small, Anster Harbour was built to house the Cellardyke fishing fleet.
Right, okay.
And John Miller, when he moved from Cellardyke, he then started building at West Anster. They built 50-odd boats there, and, you know, it was just an amazing...
It was just the photograph that you showed in your talk. What do you call it? The bulwark?
Yes, that's what it's called locally, yes.
It looked very, very high off the actual water itself. So, I mean, surely not launched from there.
Yes, no. The photograph obviously was when the tide, it must have been when the tide was out. This weekend, if you popped along to Cellardyke, we've got one of the highest tides of the year. The water will be lapping over the bulwark.
Right.
It'll probably even be underwater over the weekend. No, on a high tide, yeah, on a normal tide, you've probably just got a foot or two drop before they're in the water. Yeah. Yes. So sorry, the photograph must have shown. I don't remember, but it must have shown when the tide was out.
It looked really quite strange to think, you know,
yes,
you're just going to drop it in the water from there. I mean, I come from New Haven. Yes. And the last one that was built in New Haven was 1928. Yeah. And there's pictures of it being pulled through the streets to the harbour.
Yeah.
I mean, it was built, a good quarter-mile away from the harbour itself. Yeah. What we call the Fisherman's Park. And it was dragged through the streets to the harbour to get launched. And that was quite something different to how Cellardyke is or what.
Well, the older boat builders, that's what they did. They didn't build on the bulwark because the bulwark was used for land and fish and everything at that time. By the 1930s, Cellardyke Harbour was just no use for the modern fleet. Yeah. But the older boat builders, they used the yard. The yard was only probably 50 yards past the harbour, but they used steam traction engines to tow them. The winch on the traction engine. So they would have the traction engine sighted on the bulwark and use the wire winch and some axles underneath to tow them into the harbour. So yes, very much like New Haven as well.
Well, that's great. The next time I come over, which hopefully will not be too far away, I'll take a trip into Cellardyke and have a look at this bulwark and see it for myself.
Yes, yeah. Very good. Thanks, Peggy.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Richard? No, I'm not seeing any hands up. In that case, we'll stop the recording in a moment and just carry on chatting. But I'd like to thank Richard for a really, really interesting talk. And can I suggest that we all unmute and give him a resounding round of applause?
Here we go.
Thank you.
Excellent, really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.